Now, last time I did the talky bit here, there were a few complaints. Some thought that my subject matter was a little bit narrow, a little bit blokey, and I've taken that on board. So this morning, and I ran this by Brad, and Brad goes, "Oh, no, you can't do that. I'm a Makita man." So anyway, back to the Bible, I suppose. We're going to look at what it means to not live the good life, but leaving the good life. As we see Jesus did for us, we've just sort of gone through the Easter season, and we see that Jesus did indeed leave a good life and suffered it, came to our little puddle in the universe and suffered and died and then rose again, of course. But Philippians, that whole process, and Philippians sort of suggests to us that it's not, because I think we often sing songs that celebrate Jesus' death and resurrection, and we thank God for that, and that's absolutely 100% true and proper. But I think Philippians suggests that it's not just a point to celebrate or a phenomena to celebrate, but rather it's a way to live. So we're not just listening to Jesus' words and obeying him. We're not just trying to mimic his lifestyle, but we're trying to grasp what it means when he came to earth and how that would impact the situations in life that we face. Now that hopefully will become clearer. But it came to me in that we looked at John, I think it might have been David preached on it, and just this verse came up, and as the Father sent me, I am sending you. So this is Jesus saying this to his friends just before his death. And so as the Father, so it's kind of like saying, in the same way that the Father sent me, so I am sending you. So that same way, that same vibe, that same compulsion, those same impulses that Jesus had, we're to have them as well. So get me here. I'm not saying we need to obey a moral code, because I don't think Jesus was kind of into that too much, but rather to understand what were Jesus' impulses in his life, and Philippians kind of shows us what they are. So we'll have a crack at that. Now, primarily for followers of Jesus this morning, if you're undecided or you're new here, very welcome, and I'll say a little bit at the end, but this is primarily for people who are following Jesus or trying to follow Jesus, as best they can. So we're going to look at the Bible bit of the talk, and then we're going to look at three different areas. And just to apologise right at the outset, because I'll probably say some things that may offend you. I'll be behind the toilet block after the service. You can deal with me there. I suppose for those of you who know, we've come back to Dalby a couple of years ago. We spent some years overseas, some years in Sydney, and so coming back to Dalby, which we are really enjoying, but there has been a few things that have hit us hard, and when I've looked at Philippians, I thought, I'll have a crack and maybe just talk about a couple of those things. So the Bible bit, we're just going to have a look at just a section of the passage that we read, and there's 3 or 4 or 5 statements about Jesus there. So to try and understand those, I've reworked them so that they are kind of directed at us, more so than statements about, it'll become clear, you'll get it. So this is the first part. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ. So this is kind of back to that John passage. As the Father sent me, I am sending you. Have the same mindset as Christ. So the first statement about Jesus is who being in the very nature of God. So this is clearly saying that Jesus is God. We are not God. So how do we think about that? It's that you, me, us, we're connected to God through Jesus. So just to say, we're sort of not the same as Jesus there, but we do have this connection. As followers of Jesus, we do have this connection to God. But then the second statement about Jesus is Jesus did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. He didn't come to earth to find the good life. He came to earth leaving the good life. Where he was before coming to earth was a far better place than what he discovered down here. He was the ruler of that place. There was, or there is, no suffering there. There is no sin there. There's nothing ever is done wrong. And so that's the place from which God came to live, I think I said before, in our little murky puddle of the universe. But he didn't come to go, righto, I'm here now as the boss, and this is what everyone's going to say, and this is what everyone's going to think, and this is what everyone's going to do. And we'll see how this expands a little bit. So how do we apply that to us? So you do not consider your connection with God as a way of making your situation better. Because a lot of people will say, come to Jesus, life will get better. Well, hang on. When Jesus came to earth, his situation didn't get better. And he didn't turn that connection with God, or the fact that he was God, around and make it better for himself. Instead, we see that he suffered, died on the cross, and then, of course, rose again. So this is hinting at maybe where our life or our lives should be headed. And the third statement there is that Jesus Jesus made himself nothing by taking the nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. This is God coming to earth, as I said, not as a force, but as a servant. So you, us, me, rather stay friends and serve the worst of people around you. Help them, live with them, understand them. And see, when we look at the life of Jesus, the way that he took on servanthood was the people that society didn't like, they were the ones who spent time with. They were the ones he lived with. So his taking on the nature of a servant resulted in him hanging around with these. But the only people that Jesus ever criticised were the religious ones. Brad, Emily, I'm just saying, if Jesus was to come back, that's what we find, that's the impulse of Jesus, is to spend time with people who are perhaps not, the best in society, to help them, live with them and understand them. This fourth statement, or the fourth or fifth, I can't remember, just tends to repeat it a little bit. But being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on the cross. But it does introduce this idea of suffering. So you, me, us, connect with other people, help and suffer for them. Some will hate you. Some may even want to kill you. But make this your impulse, make this your compulsion until you die. So if we're going to take this Jesus coming to earth idea and then kind of apply it, this is where we get to, that we have a compulsion to connect with other people, as Jesus did. We have a compulsion to help, as Jesus did, and we have a deep connection to suffering, so we don't run away from it. So we connect and help, even if it means suffering. And we're not happy about that, but that's the way of Jesus. Just as he left the good life, we're not to seek the good life. We're to seek to follow him, to be sent as he was sent. So we're going to look at three. So in the light of that, we're going to look at three different areas. Now, I don't know. I picked these. So the first one we're going to look at is racism. The second one we're going to look at is gender issues. And the third one is family and friends. And like I said, I picked them, don't know why. But like I said, they're just a couple of the things. And I had a whole stack of other things sort of written down I had to pull out just because of time. And I'm not that interesting. So I will say some things. It may upset you, but hopefully we get to the point where we can understand each other. It's just a couple of things that have probably hit us a bit since coming back to town. But we do love DBC. We love you guys. Oh, actually, and Annette has no part of this. So it's all right. So racism. Oop. So to be honest, we've heard some terrible things since coming back to Dalby. Now, we heard terrible things in Sydney too, and terrible things in Turkey, to be honest. But since coming back, it's just kind of hit us a little bit. Just Muslims being slandered. Now, I know it's not technically a race thing, but it's grouping a whole bunch of people together and assuming they're all like that. So some of you may remember that we had a bit of trouble when we were living in Turkey. And so I ended up on as a Christian missionary on a national television show. And I was arrested and stuff. And it was like a current affair, so a national show. So I was walking down the streets in Istanbul, a city of 15 million people, and people were recognising me and saying, hey, you're that guy on telly, blah, blah, blah. You're that cult leader is what they said. So it was a pretty big thing, for that time. Now, as part of that, I was arrested and taken to into the legal processes. While we were away from our house, the police came, sort of in, what do you call it? Not a raid, but they dug everything up and had a look through to find Bibles. Who knows? And so the landlord then asked us to leave, which is fair enough. Nick and Kiara, if you have the police raid your place, I'll probably ask you to leave. There's nothing, it was fine. But in the process, we had one or two little kids. We can't remember just how many we had at the time. But, we had nowhere to go as a little family. And so our Muslim friends, who we had spent a lot of time with just in the previous couple of years. And they were just a normal Muslim family. They weren't Christians, they weren't followers of Jesus or anything like that. They said to us, you can come and stay with us. At considerable risk to themselves. Like I said, I was being recognised on the streets. And my fear is that if our impulse or our compulsion is to protect and defend, we might well miss the opportunity to meet those people. If our impulse is to connect, to engage, to help, to suffer, well then we get those opportunities. So when it comes to people who are from other parts of the world or from other faiths, other religions, what's your initial impulse? It'd be a real shame to miss out on meeting people who would, just like they did for us, would help you and take you and your family in. So, gender, it's gone berserk, hasn't it? There's this thing popped up on Facebook the other day. In the old days, you used to have to teach your kids about the birds and the bees, and now you've got to teach them about the birds and the bees, the bees and the bees, the birds and the birds and the... Who knows? So it's really complicated and difficult now for us and for a lot of other people. I can only, as I think about Philippians 2, I wonder whether we've got So Philippians 2 says, it indicates that our compulsion should be to connect and help, suffer if necessary. And I think our impulse as a church in Australia has been to try and dictate and correct other people. Does that make sense? So our impulse has to be to dictate to and correct other people. Like an Anglican, just a parishioner in Sydney, gave $1 million to the No campaign on marriage equality. And I think, look, that's okay. Like, I'm not particularly criticising him, but it does set up a bit of a dynamic there, doesn't it? For people who are struggling with gender issues or who are same-sex attracted or who are gay. And I think, Jesus didn't force us to be correct. See, the thing is, you and me, we were enemies of God, Paul says. We were enemies of God, and Jesus still died for us. We weren't correct at all. We were as screwball as anyone else. And yet, while we were enemies of God, Christ died for us. And so our compulsion when these issues come up is not to correct, or should it be? I'm not quite sure, because I don't know how it works. Because I do think man and woman, Bible, yes, that's God's intent. I do think that. And yet, how do I connect and engage, help, serve, suffer within that community? How do I do that? I'm not quite sure. But I think that our impulse as a church in the West, I think we missed an opportunity and missed the mark. And so how does that relate to us today, like right here and now? I think we've got to be ready to let God do stuff. So John Smith he started God Squad, which was a sort of a bikie gang, but a Jesus bikie gang. And not the sort of bikes that I would ride, but the sort of bikes that don't go fast or turn, like kind of Harley things. Any Harley riders, sorry, but... So he's into that. So he started this thing and he spoke somewhere, and a lady came up to him afterwards and said, look, I really need to talk to you. Can we meet? And he said, yep, that's fine. So she said, look, I've got to get to my shift at work. Come, but I knock off at 10 o'clock or whatever, come there and we can have a chat. So he said, yep, no problem. And she gave him the address. So he turned up at the right time, and the address was a strip joint. And so he didn't know what to do, like go in, not go in, anyway, but he went in, and the lady was actually doing her performance. So she finished that, and then they met, had a chat. The lady gave her life to Christ, and then over a period of time, radically changed. But the thing that John said, the thing that he realised was that God was at work in that strip joint before he even got there. And just think about that. These people, they're a long way away from where God wants them to be sexually. They're a long way away from God's intended purpose of sex. And yet here is God at work in that joint. That's the impulse I think we need to have. Not to say, you're wrong, you need to be like me, you need to behave the same as me. But no, here is Christ. Christ died for me. I was an enemy of Christ, and he died for me. We need to be able to connect at that point to help. And if that needs suffering on our part, well, so be it. So the third and final bit is that we've all got family and friends. I had some family here at the 8:15 service, and they can be tricky. The Bureau of Statistics actually reports that on any given Sunday there are 32.7 skirmins in church. I looked it up, like it's there. But I'm not saying the Skirman family is tricky. I mean, there can be rifts that just open up within the family dynamic. Sometimes things can happen. Sometimes succession planning is a thing that a lot of us know a little bit about. Sometimes you just drift apart. Sometimes someone does something that offends someone else within the family, and then people take sides and it becomes this thing. There's a whole stack of possible situations. Sometimes it's not even your own family. Sometimes a family friend ends up, like, the relationship falls down or breaks apart. There's, stuff between parents and kids, and you can just cop a spray just by being friends with those people. And what's our impulses in these kind of situations when things get a bit messy? So we can retreat. Our impulse may be, perhaps we retreat, we run away, we protect ourselves. Maybe our impulse is just to write people off. Well, they're not worth, like your family or friends or whoever, write them off and say, well, they're not worth my time. Is our impulse only to enjoy the family and friends that kind of suit us? Or is our impulse, as we see in Jesus, to connect, to bridge that gap, to help, and if necessary, suffer? Look, this stuff is pretty tricky. Families, friends, really tricky. And we need a heap of wisdom to know what to do in any situation. I suppose my thing is, what's our initial impulse? What's our compulsion? What would we love to see happen? Rather than, I'm not telling you do this or do that, because I know it's really, really tricky. So, in conclusion, if you're not a follower of Jesus or you're just sort of checking things out, I just want to say it may or may not be for you. Jesus left the good life, not to give us a good life, but to show us a direction for our lives. Now, there's joy and contentment, there's a lot of really good stuff, there's deep connections, there's direction, there's purpose. There's a lot of fantastic things if you're thinking about following Christ. But having all your dreams come true, having all your relationships tied up and all neat and tidy, figuring out gender, figuring out race, all that sort of stuff. We're not perfect, I think, as someone prayed, but we're heading in a particular direction is what we're trying to do. So if you're thinking about what this is all about, bear in mind that there is a cost to pay in following Christ. You don't get it all your own way. And if you want it all your own way, then following Jesus is not for you. But if you are followers of Christ, there was a whole stack of other topics that I threw out only because of time. So we could think about politics, work, school, higher education, raising children, Indigenous issues. Is our impulse, when we come across these things in life, is our impulse to retreat, to protect? Is our impulse to seek shelter, for comfort? Is it to be correct? Is it to be right? Or is there a way that we can get our impulse to be that, like what we see in Philippians? To connect with other people, to help them in whatever ways possible, and be prepared to suffer if that's what's required. We need wisdom, and we need perseverance, we need God's help, and to realise that it's not always going to work out right. And that's okay, but to think about, where do I come? How do I make decisions about what I do and what I think? Have that be from Jesus coming to earth and seeing that, and then having that guide us rather than fear or ignorance or social media or fake news or or whatever. Have Jesus and Jesus' way guide us and give us wisdom. Father, thank you that we struggle with a lot of these things because that will draw us to you. Give us wisdom. We really need it. Amen.